Hello to all my YouTubers. I hope everyone is happy and healthy. Today's topic will be on a recent event that I read in the news, and that would be on polio. So as you know, with polio, they're doing a vaccine switch. The vaccine they're using overseas is the unattenuated live trivalent vaccine, but they now just switched to the bivalent. So with polio, it came in three distinctive types: type 1, type 2, and type 3. Type 2 has not been seen since 1999, but it has been causing outbreaks after, and I'll explain that. That is due to the vaccine itself. As with any vaccine, especially with virus ones, there is a chance of getting the actual virus from certain ones that are live. Example is the vaccinia and smallpox. You won't get smallpox, but you'll get vaccinia, and that can be spread person to person. Chickenpox, there's a chance of that and eye damage. But without going off topic, the polio vaccine, you can get a nasty strain of polio from the vaccine, and you can die from it. This type of polio is called vaccine-derived polio. It's when the polio in the vaccine mutates and causes the disease. Now, according to sources such as the CDC, news reporting stations, they will put, in quotes, quoting the CDC, that there is a small but not definite but possible chance, small but possible chance of getting polio from the vaccine. Well, I honestly am a firm believer in coming to your own conclusions, because if you look on the disease maps, especially at CDC, you can see throughout year the type of polio, such as type 1, 2, or 3, and the type that caused the disease. Even on maps, you can see maps of a time span since 1999 to current year, how many of the outbreaks have been vaccine-derived 1, and how many outbreaks have been vaccine-derived type 2. Now, last year, in 2015, there was an outbreak in September 2015 where the person got very sick from it, and I think one may have died, but I'll have to check on that, and I'll probably put a link down there to the paper. They died in Europe from a case of vaccine-derived polio. Now, the problem with that is we're not given, as consumers, the proper risks. If you were to go to a doctor, especially overseas, and they use the live virus, there is no source on the wall, on the sheet they give you, about our risks as consumers, and I think we should make an informed choice on the vaccine. Polio, to be honest, is not that big of a deal. And I know I'm going to get a lot of hate comments for this, but I'll take my risks. A majority of polio cases are asymptomatic, and a lot of the propaganda that I will see when I am arguing the vaccine debate is the iron lung. A lot of vaccine places like refutations to the anti-vaccine movement, I think they're ridiculous, and they try to scare people using scare tactics. They post pictures saying, like, the risks of not getting a vaccine with all these people in the iron lung. All the iron lung was to produce respiratory breathing. The modern day machines of the iron lung are far less scary, and they're more comfortable. They're not as frightening, they're not as intimidating, and that's the problem why. If you were to see a person who had polio nowadays that were on one of those machines, basic breathing, they're not going to bother showing them. It's not going to scare people, for one. It's not going to cause a panic to get your vaccine, too. This is part of the reason why the polio is such a moneymaker. Is we've known about vaccine-derived polio for a very long time, and yet it's only recently that lawmakers finally decided to make the switch. And for the record, it's still going to cause a vaccine-derived polio because they're finding people, and I'll put another link. There was a man from England who was vaccinated orally a while ago, and he's still shedding a virulent strain of type 2 polio. How many people like him are out there that not only have been injured like that by the vaccine because they're now shedding out particles like that, but two, I don't think eradication is possible, and if it is, we're going to start seeing mini outbreaks of polio again, not because of people that aren't vaccinated, but because people that were vaccinated, thus proving that the vaccines are far more dangerous than any benefits they produce. Now, as a consumer, what you can do is you can always refuse the polio vaccine. I personally would. when I have my kids, I will not give them the vaccine. And in addition to this, I think that global movement with the polio vaccine change is not that significant, but if not more risky, because they did not use up all the stocks of the vaccine. Instead of using them, what they did is they're either going to destroy them, a majority of them are going to get buried underground. Not only one is that, what if there's a leak that can cause an outbreak? That can make the vaccine mutate and evolve. The vaccine-derived polio is dangerous, it's if not much more dangerous than the polio in the wild. Polio used to be around in the Egyptian times, but did not paralyze people because they were exposed to it. I don't know how to explain this right, but they were exposed to it younger. What happened with the modern day system, right as we were transitioning in a society that was covered in dirt, which wasn't always a bad thing, to a society that was germophobic, is somewhere along the lines in that transition, people were outside, they were in water with other people like ponds, and that's how they're getting polio. They were getting it later on in life, which raised the risk slightly, but not quite, with the paralytic polio. Now here's the problem too with polio is something is going to fill its place, regardless if it's here or not. All the microbes will gradually cycle through. For example, we were seeing enterovirus D68. That was a relative of polio that was also paralyzing children around California and the Midwest and spreading outward. In my state, we had one person that died from it. And the thing with the polio virus too is, remember, is that when you hear people talking about the polio era, my grandma refused to vaccinate her children with the polio vaccine. She thought it was ridiculous. She grew up in the time of polio. It was not as severe as they said it was. Basically, another thing too is why polio wouldn't be a big deal. Back in the day, people were more active, and people today are concerned about a polio outbreak in the USA. Part of the reason why that's not possible is people are not as active, especially teens, kids, adults, as they were back in the day. So part of the reason of people living more sedentary lifestyles, they're not going to be outside swimming with other people in a pond. So it's very unlikely for a polio outbreak to spread the way it did. I'm sorry if I rambled. It was a lot of information. I might do some editing. I may not. But I hope everyone has a nice day. If you have questions, we'll talk about it. Next video coming up is how to avoid vaccination.